talked about the vow. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much once again for coming out at night, during the week. I'm sure you're all tired and have lots of other things to do, and we very much appreciate all of the effort that everyone's putting into this. My name is Kristen Harrell. I chair the Lawrence Redevelopment Authority. We are a volunteer board. I'd like to just quickly introduce my fellow board members, Elias Rodriguez, Evan Silverio, and Janelle Graziano over there. We are, a lot of folks here are on the Citizens Advisory Committee. Would you mind just kind of raising your hand? It's actually a majority of the room. Thank you very much, all of you. This is possibly the largest Citizens Advisory Committee ever created, and it speaks to but I mean, in other places, they have to really beg people to do this, and the fact that we got so many great people from so many different walks of life in Lawrence is a huge asset to this process, and it says so much about the city. But I do really want to thank you again for your time. Where we're at in the process, a lot of you were at the meeting in November, which was our first community meeting. So in the subsequent months, we've put together the Citizens Advisory Committee. Our consultants have been working very hard on a lot of data, and they've been at the point where they're bringing in other sub-consultants. So this is kind of potentially a midpoint of the process in terms of, so it's a very important meeting in terms of taking stock of some of the initial feedback we've been getting and also kind of laying a lot of information on you. So we're going to be doing a lot of stuff tonight. Please bear with us. There's sugar and salt and things in the back to keep you going, and we'll try to keep it interesting and fun. But it is a really important point for us to kind of check in on some of the ideas we've had. We've tried to do some synthesizing of those ideas, so we want to make sure we're on the right track. We want to hear if we're not on the right track with some of this stuff, and we really want to see if we can get some resonance around some important early ideas. Does that set the context? Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Maggie Superchurch, who is our consultant on the LRA, helping us kind of manage this whole process, and she'll get you a little more oriented.
Great. Thank you. Again, really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Welcome. It's great to be in this building. I think most people here have been here, but if you have not, take a minute to look around. This was one of the original boarding houses, and it's really just a gem of a facility. In particular, thanks to Jim Beauchesne and the Heritage State Park for hosting us here this evening and making this space available. So, wanted to say a couple things before handing it off to Emily and her team to walk you through some materials. We're going to be sharing a lot of information tonight. There's been a lot of work over the past few months, and for those who have not been at a meeting since we last convened in November, December, a lot has happened since then. Many of you, especially the CAC members, have been keeping up with that work. So some of you will have seen some of it, some of you will have seen a lot of it, and maybe some of you have not seen any of it. So wherever you are in the process, we will be going through from kind of where we were and where we started to where we are today and asking you to give us feedback on all of that. So if there are parts that are very familiar, just be patient, and we'll try and get through it all and make sure everybody has a chance to give us your feedback and your thoughts on the material presented tonight. So I just want to say a little bit about the agenda, what we're going to cover. Ooh, if I don't screw this up. What did I do?
We'll get you back up there.
There we go.
Yeah, and then it's just
Push this one?
I just use the left button onto there or there.
Okay.
Should be good.
Technology is always the hardest part. Okay, so Kristen mentioned the LRA board members and the CAC folks who are here. I will also mention that there is a website, lawrencetbd.com, which has all the information that's been presented at prior meetings, a list of our CAC members, a link to the board members on the city website, a lot of other information. So I would encourage you to check that out before the meeting, after the meeting, if there are things you want to go back and look at or remind yourself who was in the room, somebody you talked to this evening. So tonight we're going to be sharing some information with you, again, just kind of trying to build the story from where we were, where we started, to where we are today. We'll take some questions, and then we get to do the fun part, which is really just working through God, this is terrible. I can't do this. Okay, thank you. Third time's a charm. which is really working in groups and in pairs to look at the information presented and start having some conversations about where we go from here. So Emily and her team will introduce those exercises, but the point is for us to do less talking and for you all to do more talking, and give us a chance to hear your thoughts. And then we'll tell you a little bit about more about sort of where we go from here. So Kristen introduced the Redevelopment Authority board members. Michelle Melancon couldn't be here this evening as she's out of the country, but the other 4 board members are here, and you'll be hearing from them and talking to them, and we encourage you to seek them out and give them your feedback throughout the course of the evening. I've been introduced, so you know who I am. And we have Emily Innes from the Cecil Group, and Margarita Iglesia, and Kevin Gurley in the back. And so they will be with us also for the course of the evening. Both Kevin and Margarita are also bilingual in Spanish, and so we can have conversations in whatever language you wish. You'll be hearing more from them later. We've tried to keep all the material translated in both languages, so it's available to anybody if they want to go back and look at it. So this is our CAC. I think most of the folks are here this evening, though not all. As Kristen said, it's a 26-member CAC, which is fantastic. There's so much talent, so much excitement. Bios for some of the CAC members are on the website, so again, encourage you to check that out. But we have a lot of great perspective, a lot of great experience in the city. So with that, just to say a few words for those who are not part of the CAC about sort of what the group is and what its charge is. So the Citizens Advisory Committee was put together in the sort of toward the end of 2015 into 2016. It's a group of all volunteers who are working with the LRA to help put this plan together. And there are several different roles for the CAC. One is to provide input on the topics that are being discussed as part of the plan on a rolling basis. One is to review and comment on materials prior to and after public meetings to sort of give us a little additional opportunity for feedback. To comment on what we hear, so some of what you're seeing was discussed by the CAC and reflected comments from the first public meeting. And when we get to a draft plan, to review and comment on the plan. Last but certainly not least, it's to really get the word out about this process and encourage people to be involved, because you all are the best way for us to let people know what's happening. All of your networks and friends and colleagues and neighbors are people that we hope to reach through this process. So if you think there's someone who should be involved or who would be a great person to give feedback, please encourage them to check the website, talk to you, reach out to one of us, because we're certainly always available and happy to talk between these meetings as well. So with that, I'm going to ask Emily to take over and give you a sense of what we've been doing and where we're going from here.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be back in Lawrence again and to talk to you about all of the data that you see pictured on the walls here and give you a chance to really go through these maps and tables and charts and get a feel for where we've been. As Kristen said, we are about midpoint in the process, so this is a great time to check in with all of you and see that we're on the right track, hopefully, and if not, you're going to tell us where we need to be focused. And we've got 3 exercises for you today to do that. So we're in the definition of boundaries and refinement of plan elements at this point. We've gone through a first study area, which we presented at the November public meeting. We've tested it with the CAC as far as narrowing it down at a public meeting or a meeting with them in January. And then we're back here with you with both results from the November meeting and some new information. So when you start, you'll be starting here and walk your way around. And that's passed, and that brings you up to date over here. So what I want to do with you tonight is just run through a little bit more of where we've been and where we're going. You can see here that we've got a couple more meetings coming up this spring, one with the CAC in April. May 7th, the Lawrence History Center is actually having a symposium on urban renewal, which covers far beyond Lawrence. But we're going to be there presenting what we have as of May to sort of get the word out about what this city is doing in the modern era. LRA meeting in May, and then our next public meeting is currently scheduled for June 15th, and we'll be presenting sort of the end of the process before we get to the writing stage and move into approval there, which will happen in the late summer, early fall. So our goals for this meeting are to test and validate the vision statement, which has come out of the work that we've done so far, review and refine the urban renewal area boundary. We have a draft boundary for the second phase that came out of the work that we did with the CAC, and then to really brainstorm, in group settings after you've reviewed the data, brainstorm potential projects that the LRA could do based on what you've seen here tonight and what you know about your community. So the LRA started off with goals, and you've seen these before, for the urban renewal plan of economic development, job creation, improved quality of life, and fiscal stability. And what we've heard to support this come from the public forum, an enormously positive message, which is really nice because you come into some communities and some people are a little dispirited. This community has really come forward with this positive message. People love their city. Diversity of cultures, the promise, the history, the current assets in the area. And they came up with a lot of concerns, too, and some of them cannot be addressed by the LRA. They may be very valid concerns. Actually, I heard talking with someone tonight about some of concerns dealing with enforcement or maintenance. And these are not, while they may be very important, they are not things that the LRA can do. But some concerns are the province of the LRA. So public improvements, public infrastructure improvements are things that the LRA can do, create additional outdoor spaces, help with encouraging a diversity of businesses, and in that, thinking about how to create jobs from what they do in terms of land development can help spur these other improvements. So we also had a sort of holiday drop-in at Altair, and you'll see some of the results in the back corner from that. And again, a very positive message, Lawrence as a city of opportunity. And so how does the LRA, our question is, how does the LRA start to help the city realize those opportunities? Because people felt it's not quite there yet, and you'll see that in the results in those two sides. So again, many of the comments that we received, improving the identity of the area, not just to the current residents, but more importantly to the outside world, telling people that Lawrence is this exciting, diverse place that has a ton of cultural assets and physical assets. So how, again, does the work that the LRA does contribute to that? So we looked at the comprehensive housing study, which was just finishing up as we started our portion of the plan. And one of the interesting comments in it was that Lawrence residents don't have access to the type of higher paying jobs that would allow them to afford a higher level of housing stock. They're commuting to lower paying jobs outside the city and are finding it difficult to afford housing. So in terms of how the LRA think about economic development and job creation, how does this also affect what's going on in the city in terms of housing? So the other half of that is the people who are working in Lawrence aren't necessarily living here. And so when they go home at night, they're spending their money outside of the city. Maybe they're bringing their lunch to work and not necessarily going to places around here. So again, is there something we can do to encourage the people who are coming here during the day to spend more of their time, more of their money, more of their energy in the city itself? So we've looked at this idea of a circular economy. Growing local businesses, they would hire Lawrence residents at higher paying jobs, allows these residents to get a higher level of housing and services, supporting local businesses with their higher paying jobs, who would then hire more people from Lawrence and then continue that circle. So this, as we start to look at the economic data, and you're going to see a first pass at it tonight, is there something that the LRA can do to support this type of job creation and then support for local residents in higher paying jobs? So the current draft vision statement, and I'm going to read it out, and by the way, this will go on the website that Maggie mentioned earlier, lawrencetbd.com. So I know it's a lot of text, but you'll be able to pull it up and read it through. So the draft vision statement that we're going to be testing with you tonight, because again, nothing is yet final, is to create a stabilized circular economy in which residents have access to higher paying jobs, enabling them to afford better housing and goods and services within Lawrence. To accomplish this, the LRA will develop an urban renewal plan that, first, draws from and encourages the talent in terms of labor and local businesses that exists within Lawrence today. Second, builds on Lawrence's physical assets, including its historic buildings, rivers and canals, infrastructure, and transportation. Third, projects a positive image for the city of Lawrence, encouraging both residents and visitors to support local businesses and cultural institutions. And fourth, attracts regional employees to locate or expand in Lawrence. This came out, and the reason it's a draft vision is it came out of first the work we did in November and December with public meetings, the work we did with the CAC in January, and then discussions with the LRA last month. So again, we're going to be testing this with you tonight to see, are we on the right track with this vision? Do we have to modify it? And if we modify it, in which direction do we go? So there's a couple of questions. I've already identified some of them. How do you encourage local businesses to grow or regional businesses to relocate? And how do you encourage them to hire local people for their jobs? How do you enable Lawrence residents to participate more directly in wealth creation by supporting their businesses or jobs? And this is the key question for all of us tonight and as we go forward in the second part of this plan, what can the LRA do to accomplish this? So in looking at that, what does a redevelopment authority do? And they engage in the development of land to address decadent, substandard, or blighted conditions. And when I say blight, a lot of people think of the anti-blight laws that some communities have. Did people mow their lawns? Did they paint their houses? That. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a technical definition of blight that comes under the state's enabling legislation. So it is not blight the way most of us thinking about our communities might identify, oh, that person didn't paint their house and therefore the area is blighted. This is a very technical definition. In fact, we've got some CAC volunteers right now who are doing a survey to identify potential conditions. You know, I love the term decadent because when I first came across it, when I first started doing urban renewal work, you hear a decadent area. Are there people with like evening gowns and champagne glasses? And again, decadent is one of those technical terms, comes out of originally the urban renewal legislation in the 1950s and 60s. And the idea is you're thinking of an area that is decaying for some reason. So let's talk about what the technical definition is. Buildings or sites that are deteriorating or deteriorated or vacant in the long term. So we're not talking about, oh, that building's been empty for 3 months, it's decadent. No. We're talking about long-term systemic vacancies. The private market is not able to address the vacancy for whatever reason. That reason could be, for example, significant environmental hazards. It could be conditions in the building itself that make it too difficult for a private owner or too expensive for a private owner to address. One example in much smaller communities, by the way, many suburbs have old downtowns that have two-story buildings, and you'll often find that the first floor is easily rented out, but the second floor is not. And when you probe into that, the second floor isn't rented out because it was done in the 1910s or 20s, pre-American with Disabilities Act's requirement. So in order for those to be public spaces, you would have to put an elevator in there for access. Many times retrofitting these buildings is too expensive for a single property owner. So that's where we're talking about a systemic vacancy. Significant environmental hazards, substandard public infrastructure, and this is where the LRA can do public infrastructure, those physical conditions that the private market can't address, and then substantial changes in businesses or in business or economic practices, like, for example, a downturn, say, 5 or 6 years ago that really destroys the local economy. So these are from the legislative definition of blighted conditions. So it's more than just that coat of paint. So, but the blighted conditions give if an area is decadent, it gives the LRA the authority to work in that area. So if this is determined as a decadent area, what can the LRA then do? And that's where they undertake planning studies, such as this one, acquire, lease, develop, and dispose of real property, and develop land and buildings themselves. They can do it two ways. They can either do the development themselves and control every aspect from start to finish, or they can acquire the property and have a developer work on it. They can also put in regulatory restrictions, and these can include zoning regulations, but it can also include design guidelines, and that's something we've been talking with the LRA about, especially for the historic assets that are in this area, is should we be considering design guidelines that control how the area looks as other developers are working in here, and that is an open question. And also they can fund development projects by borrowing, issuing bonds, or receiving grants and gifts. So we're looking for these conditions, and it's one of the things we want to talk to you about with you tonight is what conditions determine where the LRA can be most effective. And we're hoping as you look through the data in the first steps and as you talk among yourselves in the exercise in the second steps, that you help us identify where you think the LRA could be most effective. And so this you'll see again, but are there potential projects in the area that fit within that legislative mandate that I just talked about, meets the LRA's goals, the vision that we're working on with you, the members of the communities, build on existing assets, and most importantly, in the 60s, urban renewal was about the municipality doing it all themselves. Now what you're looking for is the catalyst development where the LRA does a project, but the idea is by doing that project, whatever it might be, is it's encouraging private investment to come in and finish the rest of the projects and to reach, so they're really the trigger for additional private investment coming in. They are not doing it all by themselves. And so we're looking for projects that will visibly transform the area over time, directly benefit or create value for Lawrence residents, and going back to that question of identity, positively impacting identity not only within Lawrence for people in Lawrence, but beyond. How do you tell the rest of the state, the rest of the country, Lawrence is the place to be? So we've talked about these. So let's talk a little bit about the data collection that we've been doing. So there are a bunch of partners in this. We, the Cecil Group, are the lead consultant, but we have some other consultants that are just now starting to kick off their work for this project. Stantec will be looking at market forecasting, infrastructure, and real estate development. FXM Associates is doing retail and commercial market analysis, and you're going to see the first pass at their information tonight. And then Bonds & Company will be doing property appraisals when we get to the point of doing a project. Right now, we're mapping the additional physical conditions that the CAC is collecting and that we're collecting. We're looking at the possibility of blighted conditions and what that means. We're looking at commercial space and retail, and then we'll be using that to do build-out scenarios. And build-out scenario says, what do you have now? What does the zoning allow you to do? And what does the market demand allow you to do? And in looking at those three pieces, we can see what the possibilities are of adding square footage to the area and then what the implications of those will be. So in June, you will see the effects of that analysis. The CAC will probably see it earlier. So this is our study area for this phase. Again, this is not the final urban renewal area, it's just the study area of this phase. And you will see a map of it over there underneath the graph, so you can look at it in more detail. But this study area comes out of the work that we did at the initial part of this, and the analysis that we did after that, some additional analysis on data that you'll see behind Margarita there, and then the work that we did with the CAC in January, which you'll see behind Kevin there when you start wandering around and looking at the data. So I'm going to stop briefly here and see if there are any initial questions, because I know I've just dumped a lot on you, and then we'll talk about the next stage. Anything for the moment? Yes?
This whole concept of what the authority is going to do, are we talking eminent domain situations, or?
So I'm glad you mentioned eminent domain. Eminent domain is a tool that a redevelopment authority can use. It does not have to use it. So a redevelopment authority, as I said earlier, can acquire property, It can do that by purchase, by gift, or by using eminent domain. And eminent domain now is a very public process. You can't just go out and do it. First of all, they have to have an approved urban renewal plan to even use that. And second of all, it has to go through a public process of identification of the property, public hearings, and so forth and so on. So it's not something that can just happen. Right now, at this stage, we have not identified anything that would require eminent domain. We're not there. They would have the authority to do it within the urban renewal area, and they would have to identify it within the plan, which properties they were going to consider for eminent domain. Or, if they didn't have any properties at the time this plan was approved, they would have to amend it before they could do any form of eminent domain on new properties. And the amendment of a plan to add a project, it's called an urban renewal project under the legislation, the amendment of that plan would have to go through the same process that this plan is going through. So again, it would be a public process to amend the plan and then a public process to take the properties as well.
And you mentioned legislation. You're talking city legislation?
State legislation. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else at this point? Yes. First you and then you.
The first place that came to my mind was the Merrimack investment like that, and I saw some.
Okay. Keep that in mind when we get to the table exercises, because we'll be identifying specific sites at that point.
So I was thinking about when we were talking about investors,
Mm-hmm.
when that happens, does that mean, so the investors come in and, obviously invest into certain places that we live in? And then do they, like, when they get involved, then do they, like, do they just want to come here and make a profit and leave, and then everybody starts, like, gentrification, and then they can't afford to live here?
So that's a really interesting question. Might be slightly beyond the discussion tonight, but let me start with it. No, not all questions are good, by the way. Gentrification is always an issue when you're looking at revitalization, and it's something that we've been talking about already and will consider as we move forward. So I'm glad you brought that up. As far as, I don't want to comment too much on specific parcels, but how the private development is done will depend on what protections and controls that the LRA puts into the urban renewal plan. So as I said before, they can do regulatory controls such as zoning. They can put in specific dimensional requirements, for example. They can put in specific design requirements. If it is a property that the LRA owns or acquires as part of the plan, then they have additional control over the type of the development that's done there. So while I don't have a specific answer tonight, it is something we will consider as we move forward. So thank you for bringing that up. If they have, yes, if they've written the plan that way, yes. And not all urban renewal plans have design guidelines or regulatory controls. So, Jen, you had a question? Hey. Sure. Yes.
So, from reading all the meetings, how do we come to the conclusion of this particular area around the river as the first area of focus versus anything up over on the other side of the common, or more interestingly, up along Broadway? Was it, of the groups that came together and did drawings, 3 of the 5 outlined this, like, how did we come to this conclusion?
So that's an excellent question. I'm going to point you along to these boards here. So, actually this is good because it allows me to tell you what some of these are, because not all of them have stickers. So the first one you'll see is over here. These are other planning projects that have either already been completed in the area or are in progress. And so right here, from Broadway over, those plans are mostly complete. Merrimack Street land use south of the river has just recently been completed. I believe the final report's not yet been turned in, but they've done all the public process. The area-wide planning grant is just kicking off. I think they had their first meeting about 3 weeks ago. So in looking at that, one of the considerations was how much planning has already been done in the area. This is current development projects that are happening with the original study area. And you'll see this red line on all of these maps along here. This is the study area that we started out with. So you'll note that this study area did not actually start out with being north of the Common, but it did have Broadway in it. This map here is the first set of input we got from people. We met with various different groups at the beginning of our process. Lawrence Partnership, North Canal Commission, talked to a few other people, and this is where they identified opportunities, which are in green, and barriers to change, which are in red, and you just have the graphic here. This sort of section along here that are all on boards came from the November 18th meeting. Here you've got where people mapped their neighborhoods, what they considered to be their neighborhood. These two go together. This was where do you live and where do you work and how you get there. So you'll see the stars are destination points, and some of the text refers to that. I go to this restaurant, I live here. And then the lines are how people traveled through the area. Now, we did this for the whole city, as you can see here, but what we did was we cut it down so you could really see how people traveled through our original study area. The thicker the line, the more people traveled through in this area. This was our second exercise where we said, where do you shop, where do you play, you know, where do you go for recreation? And again, thickness of lines determines travel. Black here is where people wanted to go. We had a few people who identified where they did not want to go, so that's in red. And here is the text that goes with that. And you can see some areas where the text is just overlapping each other, and those tend to be of larger destinations. And then in this area, what we did was we overlaid, you can see just underneath the planning areas that had already been done, and then we overlaid the information from the other maps minus the text and put it there so we could see what was going on when you put all this information together. Here we have land use, and so you'll see that the yellow is residential, the red is commercial or retail, purple is industrial, blue is municipal or institutional. We had one green there, a couple of greens there that were supposed to be open space. And this is assessor's data, so actually as you go around, if you find errors, we'd be happy to have them because assessor's data always lags the point in time in which you're looking at it. This is historic buildings, so redder is newer and paler is older. And then right behind Kevin and Abel, sorry guys, let me just pull this up. So this is the map that we did at the CAC meeting in January. We had 4 groups, and we asked each group to look at the different areas that they wanted to, that they thought that the urban renewal area should be narrowed to, the areas of greatest focus. And this map shows them all overlaid on top of each other. So you can see where the different colors are different groups, and you can see how they overlaid on top of each other. So that's the principal data, and looking at these that we look to create this draft boundary here. We're going to be testing it at our second exercise tonight, so we're going to be kind of interested to see what your thoughts are on that draft boundary, but that's how we got to that first part. Yes? So the green... Yeah, the green dots come from here, and the yellow dots come from the current development projects back here. So, anything else? And then I'll want to, yes, and then you.
Did you say that those maps, up till the land use and the age of buildings maps were based on a meeting that was held in November?
November 18th, it was the public kickoff.
Participated in that?
I think 47.
So that's the data of 47 people.
Yeah.
in the city. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then all overlaid except the text. You had a question, yes?
You spoke about encouraging business diversity.
Yes.
I'm very curious when marijuana becomes legalized. How do you see that process affecting yours?
I do not have an answer for that, I'll be honest. So I have not gotten that far.
I see that's policy.
I try that. Anything else? So let me start you on this first exercise, since I've already started you on the data. You are each going to grab a partner, preferably somebody you do not know. LRA and CAC members especially, I'm going to count on you guys to help kick this off. You're going to discuss maps and other data with your partner. You're going to, if you have any questions, you can call on Kevin, Margarita, Maggie, Kristen, myself, and we're happy to answer them to the best of our abilities. And then we have blue stickies and yellow stickies over there. Put any questions you have on the blue stickies and paste them on the map on which you have questions. Comments on yellow stickies, that gives us a chance to scan and say, okay, that one's got a lot of questions, that one has a lot of comments. And so when that's done, and we're going to give you about 40 minutes to do that, when that's done, go back to your tables and we'll start on exercise 2. But before we start, I just want to hand this over to Margarita.
Hi, I'm Margarita Iglesias. Some of you have met me. I'm a planner and urban designer with the consultant team. And I just want to make sure to make the point that both Kevin, Gurley, and myself are able to speak Spanish and can assist you if you need any translation or have any questions. So I'll say it in Spanish now. Soy Margarita Iglesias y soy diseñadora urbana y estoy trabajando en este proyecto con el Cecil Group. Y Kevin, Gurley y yo hablamos español, somos bilingües, y si necesita alguna aclaratoria o si tiene alguna pregunta que desee que le respondamos en español, siéntase cómodo de venir y hablar con cualquiera de nosotros o llamarnos y los ayudaremos. Gracias.
We actually left our Chinese speaker back at the office, which is true. So grab your partners. Let's get started. So if you start, as I said, you start there and work your way around. I'm hoping you've all had a chance to look at the data. There'll be time at the end, too, where you can look at the maps again. But right now, we're going to focus in on a group exercise. So you should all be at a table with somebody who has a map and a pen. That person will be your facilitator. You're going to do two things. You're going to identify which of the sub-areas is most important for the LRA to focus on in the next 5 years. So an urban renewal plan has a long lifespan, generally 20 years, a few 30 years. But right now we're looking at the shorter term, so that 5-year period. Then the other thing you're going to do is brainstorm potential projects. I have a competitor. Brainstorm potential projects where you think the LRA could make a difference, back to those catalyst sites or buildings that we talked about earlier. Now, some of you pointed out a problem with a couple of our maps, and that we had stars or asterisks, but we didn't have information. So this is the most critical piece. Make sure you write your ideas down. So if you put a big star and say this is a potential project or a potential important site, or this is the sub-area that we think in this group think that we want you to work on, tell us why on the map, because that's how we record it and report back. And then at the end of this exercise, you're going to choose somebody to report back. Hopefully it should be somebody who has not reported back at a previous meeting. And that person is going to identify the sub-area that the group came up with and the projects that the group came up with. You'll work with your facilitators. Maggie and I will be floating around if you have any questions. And you've got about 20 minutes. So, on you go. if I can have your attention, we're going to report back now. I know you want to keep talking, because I would too. So, Kevin, is your group ready? Do you have a designated speaker? Someone who's not reported back before. Sorry? Oh, no, you don't want me doing it. Yes? If not, everybody need your attention. We're reporting back now. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you the mic. So who's reporting back? All right. Excellent.
All right, Janelle's doing the Essex Street part, and I'll do...
Let's get someplace where everybody can see us.
Okay, you want to stand on the table?
Okay, Jessica and I are going to do this together. Our idea is that on Essex Street, there's a lot of vacancy in terms of upper space, offices that no one wants to use, and in some of those places has been vacant for many, many years. So we think that if those units get converted into residential, then it will bring a lot of people, and that will enhance and will make the retail part to grow. And also, we think that if we focus in this part here, it's a way of concentrating here, because everyone wants to come to downtown. Investors, when they want to invest in the city, the first thing they said, let me see the downtown. I want to take a ride in the downtown area. And most of the time they get discouraged because there's so many vacancies. And of course, improving the facade of the business.
Yeah. I think the other thing we talked about is that maybe the LRA should take on some of the hardest to develop. Yeah, here, Dick, let's turn the map the other way so that people can understand it. North is that way.
North is up.
Our writing is upside down. That the LRA should focus on some of the hardest to develop properties. And so 3 other areas that we were talking about are this whole Newark paper complex in the Central Island, which is like, you know, there's could be beautiful river access and potential for development here, and maybe some parking and green space and some destination that opens up the river and unlocks the development potential of other buildings around there. But it's just such a huge mess back here right now, and yet there's some stuff to work with. And then, of course, the Merrimack paper site and the whole western part of the South Island, which also just seems like a huge mess, right? And that the LRA should take on, it's going to have back taxes, it's going to have environmental limitations, and that is a site that the LRA could use its powers to unlock something and catalyze other development. And then the last thing is we talked about the canal, the North Canal being potentially such a beautiful asset for the city, and that right now, just the state of repair that it's in and the state of the old infrastructure along it, there's all this money being poured into the city for both affordable and market rate housing and retail and commercial spaces in a lot of places along the North Island and along, this side of the canal, and yet the canal itself kind of unfortunately mitigates against the impact of those investments because of the condition of it. So,
Thank you very much. Evan, your group next? Yes.
So I think our results kind of really mimicked what the first group was talking about. We we discussed this, the same downtown area and Essex Street and the upper level vacancies that we've seen along there, and how trying to get more active use there, whether it's offices or residential units, could help feed the businesses that are existing now, and perhaps encourage new ones. But when we started talking about projects that would probably fit more into LRA's scope and have the widest amount of impact, we wound up coming down to the same area of South Canal and the potential for developing larger stretches, possibly combining parcels to bring industrial uses back to the area. Looking at the island area here and the space that's currently owned by is it National Park or Pemberton Park, and maybe developing that as like a concert venue, to attract areas, that way. And then the same thing, the lack of use being done with these buildings, or in the case of like the Pemberton Mill, it's cold storage, and it's one of the most beautiful mill buildings in the city. So that was again. Oh, and one last thing that was brought up that we thought really deserved consideration was the fact that segments of Lawrence have become a real destination point, particularly within the broader Latino community from outside of Lawrence, because of the number of restaurants and nightclubs that are more focused on Latino food and Latino music, and maybe that's something that we should be trying to develop and actually expand on as a destination point for the city. And I think that covers a lot of it. Yeah, we done. Yep. So, thank you.
So we mostly focused on the Pemberton Park area. We think that there's huge potential for that to be one of the biggest attractions of the city. A couple concerns that we had were access to that area, but if we can somehow put like a plan together that can bring people to this area, I think it would definitely help with entertainment. I know people, they want to go out to restaurants. You guys just spoke about a concert venue. I think that's an awesome idea. And maybe like a sit-down restaurant, or like a big sit-down restaurant, like a Cheesecake Factory right here. You know what I mean? That'd be awesome. And then the other areas that we highlighted was this small park here next to the International Business Center. Oh, well, this small area here next to the International Business Center, and maybe make that like a park that oversees the river. I know I have kids, and I'd love to have another park that oversees the river. We already have this one right here. It'd be nice to have this one for people who lives kind of like in the inner city. This park is good for people that live like in the Prospect Hill area. And then we were talking about this Western Merrimack Street area here as well. There's a bunch of storage containers and stuff like that. I think that piece of land could be used for something else. I'm not sure what exactly, but I think that we can. This is a good area to focus on. Another idea that was just thrown out there was just maybe have like some sort of cruise or a boating company that goes up and down the Merrimack Street, Merrimack River, from side to side. I don't know. I thought it was a neat idea. They do it in Boston, the Charles River. Why not Lawrence? So
We want to run a little shuttle Gary, from your place up to Lawton's and Lawton's back down on a canal.
Little canal shuttle.
And I'll be the first to row it. I don't know the Italian songs.
So that's pretty much,
So we thought about a rowboat rental or something like that, just to get people to actually go on the canal. Whether Anella likes it or not is another story. So.
Excellent.
Hi. So, hi, how you doing? So we talked about also, where are we? Which one is the river? Okay.
That's the way we wrote.
So where the waterfalls is, where the Merrimack Paper Company, we talked about having some planning over on that area, and we were considering some building that we could go on the rooftop, because we're always inside in the wintertime, but something like that showcases a museum and a restaurant, and then have an outdoor space at the top, top floor overlooking the Merrimack River where the falls area is. And then we kind of were talking about where the Pemberton Park is, but I like the idea of that concert. That was a really great idea. So I think we're all on the same page that we would like to see that area utilized more often. And then there was talk about bringing people to the Essex Street area and some residential space over here, and then bringing people out and having different types of, obviously we all want that, a variety of places that draw us there, and more lighting, more color, more like beautiful places that draw our attention to, wow, I want to be in Lawrence, colors, I don't know, just beautiful spaces. Is there anything else?
Did great.
The walk
Anything
along
else?
the river.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like I did this really big space, but, to get smaller area, have a walkway that it brings people out, a safe place with color. I don't know, I just keep thinking color, flowers, in the summertime. But a place that people feel safe to bring their families, to walk along the river, to get out and see how beautiful of spaces that we actually have in our city. We don't do that enough. We have to walk in places where there's a lot of traffic, a lot of cars. It would be like a peaceful area for us to go and just enjoy, and socialize and be with each other in the community. So I think that's, did I forget anything?
Yeah, no, that's it.
Oh, okay. Oh, just one other thing. We discussed of having a vision and a strategy rather than a Band-Aid, result and a choice, but have instead of just thinking, oh, we'll do this place, we'll do that place, let's have a vision of the area and what will best fit our city with the education that people have in our city, and to figure out what levels and what skills, to bring different businesses into our city so we can actually have a living wage. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a 15-year plan, and I'll go backwards. In 15 years, we want to work on the Broadway area, and it just needs to be fixed. We don't have any ideas, but it needs to be fixed. 10-year plan is the Essex Street, that we need to bring better businesses and more business into that area. And we quickly all agreed on our number one spot, which is South Canal and a certain paper mill, that would be the best thing that would transform the city immediately. We didn't come up with an idea of what to do with it, but just do something with it, so it's not an eyesore.
Yeah, we want to bring businesses into it.
Right,
so
but we
get a
didn't
better
decide
tax
what,
revenue
right.
for the city. We don't know what kind of businesses, but it would depend upon the need of the residents of the city, I guess, if you want to employ Laurentians, so.
Right, and we just felt
The
like
city needs to get more money.
trickling off of Riverwalk, that was the first area, and that it's it's kind of a reverse of what we said that, usually it's the redevelopment authority that starts so Sal started it, we pick up on it, and then hopefully other developers will come in behind us. But anything else? That's it.
It's your handwriting.
That's true. Okay, I forgot my handwriting couldn't be read. So our group, actually, if you want to hold it the other way around. We also wrote upside down. It seems to be a theme. Yeah. Okay, there you go. All right, so our focus, as you can see by all of the arrows, was in this main Essex Street corridor here. And what was interesting about that is, other than the idea of creating gateways, gateways are entry points into a particular area, creating gateways that really exist to draw people into the area. There weren't any specific projects, but there were some ideas, one of which is what's been successful in other cities. And Haverhill was mentioned as an area that has a lot of restaurants, as acting as a destination for people from other cities. But in order to do that, you need to be able to attract the type of income levels of the people who can support those restaurants. So question number one, and it goes to the economic studies, is how do you draw those people in? So the physical method with the gateways of drawing people into the city to get the people who have the right income levels to be attracted to the area. And then the key element to that is the diversity of businesses. How do you improve the diversity of businesses? One interesting point was a lot of these businesses in the area are ones that you have an appointment for. So you come down, you have your appointment. Is there something that keeps you here? Or you're coming down to go to church. Is there a place that families can go to after church or before church? So you're coming down here for a specific reason. What draws you to stay down here? So those were our main ideas. Did I miss? Okay. I think we have hit everybody, right? So I am going to do yes. I'm just going to introduce the third exercise, and then while I pass out the materials for the third exercise, I'm going to have Maggie wrap up for us. So we have cards here in both English and Spanish. You can pick your preference. On one side is a map of the current draft area and the draft vision statement that I read out to you earlier. On the other side, we're asking you two questions. One, do you agree or disagree with the vision statement, and why? And two, if you could choose, you individually could choose one site or project within the urban renewal area for the LRA to take on as part of the plan, what would it be? So the idea is, now that you've had a chance to get a feel for some of the data, you've had a chance to talk into the group, what do you want to tell us? And we're going to add a third question. So a couple of people brought up the number of people in the room and the diversity level of people in the room. And I have to say that in terms of both number and diversity, it's different from previous meetings that we've had, the people who have been there. So what we really want to know is, how do we reach out to more people? And this is a common question in any community. So any ideas that you've had, we've heard churches. We're looking for both physical methods. Is there a place where we can put flyers that everybody goes to or certain groups go to? Is there Facebook pages that people look at? Whatever ideas you have, please put them on here. And then finally, I just want to say, I appreciate, some people are nervous about giving negative comments. And I appreciate the fact that many of you said, hey, I can't quite understand this map. I think there's some information missing, because that's one of the other things that we're testing as we go through this. When we put this information into a final plan, is it readable and understandable, not just to those of us who have been dealing with it on a regular basis, but to the people who will be using it going forward. So thank you for those comments. And Maggie, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next steps of where we're going.
Great, thank you. So thanks for hanging with us for full 2+ hours. So if you would like to just sit at your table and take a couple minutes to fill out your card, that would be great. Please give it to us on the way out. Would love to have the record of your feedback. And, you know, our contact information is up here. It's also on the website. Feel free to reach out. The next CAC meeting will be in April, and so for those of you on the CAC, you'll be hearing more from us about that. And as Emily indicated, we are thinking about other ways to get out and reach people in different locations in the city, and to get the information shared more widely. So please do share your thoughts about that. And mark your calendars for upcoming meetings, because we'll be back with more, and you'll be hearing some of your comments and thoughts from today's discussion in those conversations going forward. So thank you very much, and have a good evening.